60 feet beneath the Montana prairie, behind layers of concrete, steel, and earth. Two U.S. Air Force officers begin a shift unlike almost any other job in America. There are no windows down here, no sunlight, no ordinary office door, and once the underground capsule is sealed, the outside world becomes almost impossible to feel. The two officers are part of a missile combat crew responsible for monitoring a group of nuclear missiles spread across the surrounding countryside. Their workplace is a small steel capsule designed to remain operational even if a nuclear blast strikes the surface above it. The capsule is isolated from the ground on massive shock absorbers, while thick blast doors separate the crew from the world outside. But the most surprising part isn't the missiles. It's the room itself. This is where two people are expected to work, eat, rest, communicate, and remain alert for hours at a time. There is a small sleeping area, basic food preparation equipment, communication systems, control consoles, and barely enough space to move around. One officer may be resting while the other remains at the controls. Then they switch. There is no normal 9-to-5 schedule here. The crew's alert begins before they ever descend underground, and the duty period can stretch far beyond the 24 hours commonly associated with the alert itself. And somewhere inside that cramped room are the controls connected to weapons capable of traveling thousands of miles in minutes. That creates an unusual contradiction. The job requires absolute concentration, but most of the time nothing happens. Hours can pass with nothing more dramatic than routine checks, paperwork, communication, and the quiet hum of equipment. Yet the entire system exists for one possibility: the moment when something does happen. So what does a normal day look like for the two people sitting inside this underground capsule? How do they eat? Where do they sleep? How do they stay focused when hours turn into a seemingly endless stretch of silence? And what happens when the responsibility they're carrying suddenly becomes real? To understand that, we have to go below the prairie and step inside the smallest workplace in America's nuclear deterrent. Once the capsule is sealed, the outside world largely disappears. There is no view of the prairie, no sunlight through a window, no spacious office where the crew can stretch their legs and walk away from the equipment for a while. Everything the two officers need for their shift has to fit inside a compact underground command center. And that includes food. The meals begin upstairs at the Missile Alert Facility, where support personnel prepare food for the crews. Once the alert begins, meals can be sent down to the capsule, where the options are considerably simpler. Inside, there is essentially a refrigerator and a microwave. There is no conventional kitchen because there simply isn't room for one. That means a meal can be eaten only a few feet from the equipment the crew is responsible for monitoring. Then there is sleep. The capsule has a narrow bunk, but only one bed for two officers. That isn't because the Air Force forgot to provide another one. The arrangement reflects the requirement that one member of the crew remain available at the controls while the other rests. The two officers therefore rotate their sleep periods throughout the alert. For the person trying to sleep, the environment is hardly peaceful. Equipment continues operating. Printers can chatter. Alarms and communication systems can interrupt the quiet. And there is always the knowledge that the other crew member is awake only a few feet away, continuing the watch. But perhaps the hardest part isn't the lack of space. It's the waiting. A missile crew can spend hours completing routine checks and reviewing procedures while nothing unusual happens. The competitor's source describes crews working through numerous daily checklists and using books, television, and other forms of entertainment to deal with long stretches of inactivity. The strange part of this job is that boredom and extreme responsibility exist in the same room. The crew must remain prepared for an extraordinary event while spending most of the shift doing ordinary things. And that raises an even bigger question. How do you keep two people completely focused when the job may demand everything from them, yet almost every hour looks exactly the same? The hardest part of the job isn't operating a complicated machine. The staying ready when nothing appears to be happening. Inside the capsule, the two officers follow established checklists and procedures throughout their alert. Instruments are monitored, communications are maintained, and required information is reviewed repeatedly. The work is deliberate and methodical because the entire system depends on crews following procedures correctly, even during long periods of routine activity. The two officers also have to manage something most people rarely associate with nuclear deterrence: time. A 24-hour alert is a long period to spend inside a small underground room. There are no windows to tell them whether it is morning or midnight. Their sense of time comes from watches, scheduled activities, meals, and the changing responsibilities between the two members of the crew. One officer can rest while the other remains on duty. Later, they switch. When they're not working through their required tasks, crews have ways to occupy themselves. Books, television, studying, and other quiet activities can help break up the long stretches of waiting. Some missile officers have even used the time underground to continue their education. But entertainment can never completely remove the pressure. The crew knows that the quiet routine exists for a reason. Their responsibility is not simply to operate equipment. It is to remain prepared to respond to a legitimate command while ensuring that the safeguards surrounding the nuclear force are followed. That is why the system is built around two people, not one. Neither officer is expected to carry that responsibility alone. They work together, independently verify critical information, and maintain the discipline required to prevent a single individual from acting outside established safeguards. And this is where life inside the capsule becomes much more than an unusual military assignment. Because when the most powerful weapons in the U.S. arsenal are involved, the people operating the system can be just as important as the technology itself. But that raises another question. Why was the entire system designed around two officers working together? And what happens when the people trusted with that responsibility fail to follow the rules? The two officers sitting inside the capsule are never expected to make a decision like this alone. That principle is built into the way the launch system operates. The crew works as a team, with both officers required to participate in critical actions and independently verify information. The reason is straightforward. When the consequences involve nuclear weapons, the system cannot depend on a single person's judgment. The controls themselves reflect that philosophy. The launch equipment is arranged so that critical actions require cooperation between the two officers. The physical separation between important controls makes it impossible for one person sitting alone to simply reach over and act. Both members have to be involved. But there is another layer of protection. Before any launch action could proceed, the crew would need to receive and authenticate an authorized order through established command channels. The officers don't simply decide when a missile should be launched. Their role is to follow a highly controlled process designed to distinguish a legitimate command from an unauthorized or false one. That distinction is critical. For decades, the United States has maintained procedures designed around one fundamental problem. How do you keep a weapon ready to respond without allowing one person to use it independently? The answer is not a single lock, switch, or password. It's layers of people, procedures, communications, authentication, and physical safeguards working together. But systems are only as reliable as the people operating them. And that became painfully clear when the Air Force discovered that some missile officers had been involved in a cheating scandal. In 2014, investigators found evidence that officers responsible for nuclear missile operations had compromised proficiency examinations. The scandal resulted in disciplinary actions and raised serious questions about leadership, training, and the human reliability of the nuclear force. The problem wasn't that the missiles had malfunctioned. The problem was the people trusted to guard them. And that wasn't the first time human error had created a frightening situation around America's nuclear arsenal. The cheating scandal revealed a serious weakness in the human side of the nuclear mission. But years earlier, another incident had demonstrated something even more frightening. Sometimes the greatest danger isn't an intentional action at all. It's an accident. In 1980, at a Titan II missile complex near Damascus, Arkansas, a maintenance worker accidentally dropped a socket into the silo. The object struck part of the missile's fuel system, creating a leak and allowing highly toxic propellant to escape. What followed was a chain of events that engineers had designed procedures to prevent. Fuel vapor accumulated inside the silo. Emergency crews responded, but the situation continued to deteriorate. Eventually, the missile's fuel system ruptured and the resulting explosion destroyed the launch complex. One Air Force worker was killed and several others were injured. And the most alarming part came afterward. The missile's nuclear warhead was thrown from the damaged facility, but it did not detonate. Emergency personnel recovered it from the surrounding area, and the United States avoided an even greater catastrophe. The incident became a powerful reminder that nuclear safety isn't only about preventing someone from deliberately launching a weapon. It is also about controlling thousands of small risks before they become something much larger. That is why missile crews train repeatedly, follow detailed procedures, inspect equipment, and operate under layers of safeguards. Inside the underground capsule, the quiet routine suddenly makes more sense. The checklists aren't there because the job is complicated for the sake of being complicated. They're there because small mistakes can have enormous consequences. And despite the accidents, scandals, and decades of technological change, the United States has continued maintaining crews underground around the clock. So why does this system still exist? And what does the future of America's underground nuclear force look like as the Cold War-era Minuteman III begins giving way to a completely new generation of missiles? Today, the underground missile fields of the American Great Plains still contain hundreds of launch facilities built around the Minuteman III system. The technology is changing, but the basic challenge remains the same: keeping a nuclear deterrent ready while maintaining strict control over the weapons and the people responsible for them. For the officers who enter these facilities, the mission is measured in hours rather than headlines. They descend underground, take their positions, complete their checks, monitor communications, and remain prepared throughout the shift. Then, after another crew arrives to take over, they return to the surface and eventually go home. But the next crew goes down, and the cycle begins again. That routine can be difficult to understand from the outside. There is no dramatic battlefield, no aircraft taking off, no enemy appearing on a radar screen. Most shifts are defined by discipline, repetition, and waiting. Yet that is precisely the point. The system is designed to remain ready even when nothing happens. The Minuteman III force is also approaching the end of its service life, with the United States developing the Sentinel program as its replacement. The transition represents one of the largest changes to America's land-based nuclear deterrent in decades. But beneath all the technology, one thing has remained remarkably consistent. People still have to sit underground and watch. 2 officers, 1 small capsule, hours of routine, and a responsibility that extends far beyond the walls surrounding them. For most people, the surface above is simply grassland, roads, farms, and open sky. For the crews below, it is the roof of a workplace built for the possibility of the unthinkable. And when one crew finally climbs back into daylight, another pair is already preparing to descend. The missiles remain on alert. The crews rotate, and somewhere beneath the prairie, the next 24-hour shift has already begun. If you found this look inside America's underground nuclear mission interesting, subscribe to Carrier Command for more documentaries exploring the people, technology, and hidden operations behind the world's most powerful military systems. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next mission.